Hello, beautiful Facebook peeps. It's Em. Thank you for jumping in today. And if you're catching me on the replay, hello to you later. Oh my goodness. I just had such a fun morning this morning. I got to have the start of my day, aside from the normal family stuff. My first call of the day was a really early morning call because I deal with lots of different people, lots of different time zones, but I had a beautiful morning call where I saw the N of 1 failure again. Okay, so myself, this has cost me 10 years of lost impact with what I do, and I've only just started to recover from what I call this N of 1 failure. And this morning it was another N of 1 failure that thankfully we were able to identify quick smart with this client, and then she's been able to correct it and take alternative action. And I wanted to talk about what is an N of 1. So for those of you who don't know, my background is I started out in my original career in medical, but because my interests were always this really funny dichotomy. It was always biological sciences and like English and theatre. So basically human psychology and biology, which seemed to be in conflict when I was younger, but now it all makes complete sense, right? But in biology, of course, you get told basic scientific method, and I got to spend 2 years doing a whole bunch of detailed research, which with the Queensland government in ecosystems in Queensland, learned so much. Mainly learned about the scientific method, and I also have clients who are scientists and friends who are scientists, and I cannot get away from the people. I love them. I love utilizing research. I'm not a researcher myself, and I'm very grateful to amazing researchers because they enable a lot of the implementation and the breakthrough work that people like me get to do. So big thanks to those people. But the premise in terms of the scientific method of what is an N of 1, this is something that gets misused and underutilized in business and can lead to a lot of problems. So for me, myself, and I'll share my story later about my N of 1 failure that's caused a 10-year delay for me in my impact and in my work. This morning, the example was a client with a large-scale service model, and they had experimented with a different sales process. They experimented with the different sales process. It didn't work in the first experiment, so they had one case study, and then from that they determined that that process doesn't work. And in any scientific process, in the scientific method, that means the N, as in the number, the sample size of the test is one test. We ran one test, and inside of any experiment, any test, any model, any workflow, any lead generation system, any funnel, any performance management system, any organization design model, any communication training, any market analyses, anything, any communication strategy, there are multiple factors. So an N of 1, a case study of 1, an experiment of 1 with the sample group of 1 and multiple influence factors is insufficient data. So this morning, the client was able to go with certainty, yes, this process failed, so we're no longer doing that. And thankfully, she's intelligent and fast and receptive, and I was able to point to, so your sample size is 1. And within a very short period of time, yes, she had rearranged herself cognitively to go, oh, whoa, we've got to test all these other factors. So the sales process, the messaging, the way that team is coordinated and collaborated, the way the project is executed. There was all these factors, right? Variables in that experiment. So beautifully and intelligently, she has reorganized her thinking, and she is now going to do some better quality experimentation and take that N of 1 to an N of 4. So we start to see which activity produces which result, and then we can start to say, oh, that's correlated. That's the cause. We can actually use the scientific method properly. Now, one of the only areas that scientific method is really used well in businesses that I see is in marketing. And marketers have this nailed. They have their split testing, they have their A/B testing, they have their data, and this is a beautiful way to do business. one of the tricky areas that we find is applying those tangible, measurable strategies over into what seem like more abstract concepts in our businesses. So or relationships even, anywhere we were offering leadership. So fundamentally, this is a leadership conversation. 80% of the work I do is with business leaders. So I always end up defaulting back to that dialogue. But while you're listening, please do take into account that this is exactly the same in terms of parenting strategies, relationship strategies, community leadership strategies, anything where you're dealing with being of influence to people and wanting to contribute and make an impact. So, catch my breath, I'm excited, can you tell? Okay, so I love it when a thought comes through nice and crystal for me and I can deliver it over to you guys. So the main thing that we want to see there is when it's a communication strategy, when it's a workflow process, when it's an org model, when it's a market test. Like I said, marketers are using their data really well, and these other areas of business, it can seem as if they're not as measurable, like the data's not as clear. And that's where structure-wise, organization-wise, and tactic-wise, one of my strengths is making intangibles tangible. So for years, my clients used to talk to me as an asset expert, and I never ever fully identified with that, but it was because I was working on making their intangible assets tangible, measurable, and it was contributing to the value on paper and in transaction of their business. So it was improving their overall ability to generate income with sales, because we were making previously intangible offerings tangible, and then because you can measure them, you can monetize them. Same with marketing, and why marketing has so successfully monetized itself in the last 15 years with automation. And we take that over into workflow processes, into human resources, into org models, into workflows, okay? And we start and do the intelligent scientific work of, well, how am I going to measure that? Okay, so that's where this love of science has ended up being such my friend and such a strength for me. So I'm very appreciative of that. I'm very appreciative that I had a mum who was a biology and geography teacher, and someone who was also a fan of the scientific method. She did her PhD over 10 years between the time I was 4 and 14. So surrounded by the data conversation, which was fabulous. And just one of my clients who finished her PhD, I think it was a year and a half ago, we grew her business significantly whilst she was completing her PhD, which on its own is a miracle. And she's running a family and doing all this community work and being a leader in her industry. And part of it is because we're applying the scientific method to her business. And one thing that she reminds me of all the time, and she'll know who I'm talking about if she's watching this, so I love you, thank you. One thing she brings to this is even when she's really frustrated by strategies working partially but then not working completely, is because she brings the scientific approach. I love this. She doesn't automatically go, oh, well, that's over. She and I are able to go straight into the ring and have the conversation about, okay, so we've got to make sure then we cover off and test on that variable. And then we know for sure that we've done every possible variation of that strategy, and with good conscience, with her as the business owner and me as her partner in that, as her coach, we can say, yes, we covered every variable and it worked or it failed. And that's a real part of her strength and her growth in her company, how she's been able to grow her revenue, her profit, her impact, her consumer base and her talent base, and also all the IP in that business. That's one of the strategies we're running, is building up the strength of her IP to ready her for asset to sale, and diversifying her, because she was typically a service-based model, and we're productizing aspects of that business so that there's greater revenue security, flexibility in changing marketplaces, all those beautiful things. So wanted to do a big shout out to this whole thing of, if you are trying things once and then taking the feedback as a failure, the data set is probably too limited. So working with a coach, working with an external source, like one of my clients actually in the States, she was contacting me this morning and she's saying, oh, this particular project, I'm getting frustrated, it's slowing down, it's not producing the results that it needs to produce. And I had to remind her back to, and bring her back to, do you remember the original purpose of that strategy? Because when we're in it and when we're looking through our own eyeballs, we lose perspective of that. So I was able to say to her, hey, just hold on, drop in for a second. Shout out to the amazing Cedar Thompson from Cedar Couture in the USA, you rock. She gave me that term, drop in. Drop into remembering the original intention of that strategy and what we're actually trying to produce, what result we're aiming for there. Because as we get involved, we get new ideas, we get creative, we get excited, we go, oh, and then I could do this and I could do that and I could bundle that all into this. And I had to remind her, do you remember the original strategy, the original reason why we're doing this and the actual result we're trying to achieve? And then in reminding her of all of that, all the complication went away and the stress went away, which is another beautiful factor. So when we're working in the business, you know, providing all that leadership, things get busy, things get very complex and overstimulating, and we can lose perspective on what was the purpose of the experiment in the first place. Okay, so this is where it's timely for me to share my N of 1 failure that, yeah, it's cost me 10 years. So it's been a bunch of you know already that I've been sharing about this process that I don't know how to describe it. It just came to me, right? It was a flash, it was a revelation, it was an insight, it was a vision. And it was around taking some existing neuro repatterning strategies and doing a hybrid of those strategies so it could have a completely separate application, and so that clients could do it themselves and clients could reorganize one very critical part of our neurology that we can have lots of conscious awareness over, which is belief systems, because beliefs sit and hover on that gap between the conscious and the unconscious, which means you don't know you're operating from them, but you can become aware of what they are, and then you can start to cognitively work on changing them over time, or you can repattern them, which is an instant change. Okay, and so my N of 1 failure was I couldn't believe the power of this exercise. I had used it on myself multiple times, knew it worked, and then immediately went to teach it in a group setting, which means my N of 1 was trying to deliver and train people, a group of people, in this technique when I hadn't even gone about testing a whole bunch of individuals. And that's bad scientific method, right? So that's me in my late 20s, getting so excited, going, oh my gosh, I just have to teach this to everybody. And then finding that in that group format, I had a lack of experience at even teaching it one-on-one, at effectively training it one-on-one. So my N of 1, called teaching it in the group, it didn't work the way I wanted to. So a bunch of people got stuff out of it, a bunch of people like, I'm just confused, a bunch of people I had to help later. And I took that as, see, that doesn't work, I can't do that. And I actually formed a whole bunch of limiting beliefs around being able to teach it in a group environment. And then those limiting beliefs completely cross-contaminated my perspective, and I stopped doing it one-on-one as well. I was like, oh, no, it's not ready. People can't get it. It's too many modalities. It's too complex. There's too many layers. I'm asking too much of people cognitively. Earlier this year, when I started going, oof, I really, really want to give people more of that. And the feedback from my clients was so much about how belief systems, because they can work at the level of identity, at the work at the level of values, they can impact so many powerful parts of us. I was like, really, I should be digging out that technique. And I was using it heaps on myself. And I realized I had developed a whole bunch of limiting beliefs around this N of 1 failure. So I changed those beliefs. And then since then, I've gone about doing all of my individualized testing, and I've been doing that face-to-face, I've been doing it digital, and I've now been doing it automated, where people are doing it and they don't even talk to me. Okay, so I've had a whole bunch of people work on specific areas. I've had people work on my areas where I'm running an experiment that's unregulated by them. I've had people now do it where they dictate the outcomes of the session. So I've now tested all my variables, and the program has been getting built since mid-September to be delivered so people can just learn this online in their own time and never have to talk to me, which to me is a miracle. But that's 10 years lost for me of giving that to people and having the impact I want to make. One of my issues with our industry is that really simple, effective tools, a lot of them aren't just readily available, and they should be, because I know back then when I really needed those tools, they weren't available. One, the internet wasn't available and in the capacity it currently is, but also people just were not relating to the general public like, yeah, you're smart enough, you can do this, go for it. Okay, which is a whole bunch of belief systems there as well. So between now and mid-November, when those programs launch, I'm going to take 4 more private clients who get to determine their own outcomes from that. So if you feel like, okay, cool, I've got some areas identified, so there is a qualification criteria, you have to know that there's a particular block, persistent unwanted behaviors that you are engaging in, or persistent negative emotional states or negative recurring thought patterns, ideally for you as a leader. So where you see you're losing impact in your effectiveness as an influencer, where perhaps people are taking advantage of you, where there's boundary issues, where there's performance issues, if you've got areas that are blocked to you around your business model, okay, and perceived limitations of your business model. These are the people I really want to talk to, because like I said, I've experimented with the people where I set the agenda. I've now had people who have set the agenda for their experimentation, and now I'm looking for that very specific group of people. I'm going to take 4 of you between now and mid-November when that public program launches. So reach out, book in a call with me, and we'll see if you fit those qualification criteria. Let me know, and I hope you got a whole bunch out of learning about this N of 1 and how it loses us time, focus, attention, energy, resources. And for this client this morning, she's losing a revenue stream because of that N of 1 failure that she's then not analysed fully and then being able to go, I've got all these other choices and all these other strategies available to me. All right, I love you all. Have an amazing, amazing day. Please click my link if you're one of the people who think you qualify to do that type of work with me. We'll have a chat and we'll work it out. Okay, lots of love. Bye.